This book sucked. So hey, welcome back and happy 2026 to all of you. We are back here on YouTube talking about books. I know it has been a while. It's definitely been longer than I was hoping for it to be, but I wanted to quickly address it with you guys, and then I'm never going to talk about it again, and we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about books forever until the end of time, hopefully. I was very excited to be consistently posting on YouTube and reading and doing all the stuff that I love to do throughout November and December, the fall into like the Christmas season, and I really was excited to participate in Book Myths this year. I had a whole content plan and was just gonna go after it with you guys really hard. And unfortunately, around mid-November, I had some pretty severe health complications that made me need to stop everything and just focus on my health and my family. And so I wasn't able to do really anything in November and December like I was initially hoping. I basically took a full month off of reading, didn't read anything until the end of December when I was starting to feel a bit better. I felt really weird and guilty for a while not posting as much because I honestly do really enjoy it and I honestly do love it, and I love making content for you guys. I love talking in the comments, even though there's not a lot of you. It's still really fun for me, and it's something that I've come to seriously enjoy doing, and I just had the expectation that November and December were going to be really full and really exciting, and it didn't meet that expectation for reasons outside of my control, but that was really sad for me personally. And when you get news like I did, everything just has to stop. Like, nothing else is important, nothing else matters. Even if you want other things to matter, they just don't. Everything comes to like a screeching halt, as it did for me. And it took me a bit to come to terms with that, but then once I started to feel better, I knew I wanted to come back in January really strong and just jump back into the community and the creative space and just kind of get back into that rhythm that I've come to know and love a lot. So for those of you that have continued to stick around and have been messaging me on Instagram or messaging me here on YouTube, I really do appreciate you checking in and even thinking of me. It's such a weird concept that there are people on the internet and out there in the world that randomly think about me and think about me not posting, but I did see them. I don't think I responded to any of them because, again, I just mentally wasn't able to, but I saw them and it was really, really sweet of you guys. So thank you for sticking around, and for those of you that didn't stick around, that's totally okay, and you're not here and I don't need to say anything about that. So that's kind of the update. That's what's been going on, and now we're in January, new reading year 2026, and I'm excited to talk about upcoming books and future reading projects. But for now, we do need to talk about every single book I read in the year of 2025. This is one of those massive wrap-up videos where I'm going to talk about every single book for a brief amount of time, or else this video would be like 12 hours long. I'm going to really try to keep myself short and sweet, but I'm excited to go through them all with you. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first book I read in 2025 was, of course, Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. You guys know that I reread all of Throne of Glass this year. Technically, I reread Throne of Glass, the very first book, in 2024. Is my last book of 2024. My first book of 2025 was Crown of Midnight. This is the second book in the series, and it really reached my expectations from the first time I remember reading it. I remember not really caring that much about books 1 and 2. I think the writing is pretty mediocre. I think the story, I'm not really connecting with it yet, but again, I knew that going into this, so this was more of just like, okay, get past it, get to book 3, and everything will be fine. So that reached my expectation. Not much else to say on this book. I don't want to waste time on it, but that was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. I think I ended up rating this a 3-star, very middle of the road. Do I think it's worth your time? Obviously. I think that Throne of Glass as a series is worth your time, which means that you have to read this. Even though I don't love this book, you have to read it. It's worth your time if you plan on reading the series. So that's Crown of Midnight. The next book that I read was Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. This was actually a really anticipated book for me. I got it from Book of the Month a little bit early, and I had planned on reading it at the beginning of the year. I really wanted to get into reading more mystery books personally, and this one just looked very exciting to me. It's about a writer whose wife goes missing. He goes to this remote island to try to find his creative spark again, and things just are not what they seem on this island. The whole premise and the synopsis sounded very spooky, kind of weird to me, and I liked that it was about a writer. I don't know why, but I always am excited about books that focus on writers and maybe even the publishing industry, because they just got it hard, man. Every book I read where a writer is the main character, I just feel so bad that they are writers because it seems really difficult. In general, I just was so excited about this and it just crashed and burned for me personally. This is one of those books that I'm reading and trying to put all the pieces together in my brain of how is this connecting, and it just was a complete disaster, honestly. I personally do not think that this book is worth your time in 2026, and I think I ended up rating this a 2-star. The next book I read was The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. Of course, you're going to see these Throne of Glass books pop up basically throughout this whole video. This one is interesting though because I never read The Assassin's Blade, and the reason is this is technically a prequel to the whole series. It did come out as book 3, so Throne of Glass was published first, then Crown of Midnight, then The Assassin's Blade, but it came out as a prequel, and I'm just not a huge fan of prequels, I guess. I think I just want to give so much time and energy to the actual storyline that we're following of a series, and so whenever a prequel is announced, or maybe a book is announced where it's the exact same story but from a different character's perspective, I just am never really interested in it. And so when I read the series for the first time, I didn't have the box set, I was just buying the books, and so I saw that this one was a prequel and I was like, I don't need to read that, so I skipped it. So this read through is actually my first time reading The Assassin's Blade, and I get it. I get why everybody loves this book. I get why there's discourse about where to read it in the order, but personally, I think the publication order is absolutely the way to read it. The things that happen in Heir of Fire, which is technically book 3, makes so much more sense when you have just previously read The Assassin's Blade. Some people prefer to read this as the very first book. Some people prefer to read this as book 4, some as book 3. I personally think book 3 is the best spot to read it in, and I loved it. I went into it a little bit skeptical because it is a number of short stories that follow the main character, Selena Sardothian, but it gives you an insight into who she is more of a character, some of the relationships that she had, and the ending is really, really sad for sure. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would, honestly. I ended up rating it a 4-star, and again, it's worth your time to read it because if you're gonna read Throne of Glass, you have to read it. I didn't know that. I thought you didn't have to read it, but you do have to read it. The next book, honestly, is crazy to me because I feel like I've talked about this book so much this year, but it seems like so long ago that I thought that I had read this book in 2024, and then when I was going through my Goodreads of every book that I read this year, I was like, I had no idea that I read this book this year in 2025, and that's Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. It's crazy that I read this almost exactly a year ago in like mid-January-ish. I just remember it making such a big impact on me, and I remember talking about it so much this year that I just assumed that I read it a lot longer ago than I actually did, but this was a 2025 book, and let me tell you, writers have it hard. This is another book that focuses on a writer who's trying to get her book published, and some of the choices that she makes are very morally gray and also outright wrong sometimes. It's first person, and something that I loved about this book is that our main character makes wrong choices, like I said, like bad choices. Some choices could send her to jail or end up getting her sued or whatever, and yet because she's the main character and because it's first person, she justifies everything in her head, and the way that R.F. Kuang wrote it was so convincing that it was justified to me a lot of times. Even though on paper I know that this is wrong, what's happening, I'm so invested in the character and the story that I'm like, oh no, yeah, it's totally fine. You know, it's a gray area. She can sneak on through. It's okay. It was just really, really fun to be that connected to a character who's kind of not a good person. I thought the writing was brilliant. I thought it was really funny. And again, I just feel so bad for writers overall. I rated this like a 4.5 stars-ish, and this is 100% worth your time. I've heard that it is very, very different to all of R.F. Kuang's other books. I've only read The Poppy War by her, the first book in the Poppy War trilogy. I'm planning on reading Catabasis and Babel as well pretty soon. I don't know if I'll continue with The Poppy War anytime soon. I know I want to eventually, but it's definitely not high on my priority list right now. But from what I have gathered, she's very much a fantasy writer, and this is more of a fiction book, a literary fiction book or contemporary fiction, and this ended up being the very first one that I read of her works, and so then diving into some of her fantasy stuff feels very jarring, even though this is actually the outlier. Regardless, I definitely think that everybody should read this book. It was so fun. And we're back to Sarah J. Maas. The next book I read was Heir of Fire in the Throne of Glass series. This is my favorite Throne of Glass book by far, definitely even solidified going through the whole series a second time. I don't know what it is about this one, but I just love it. It's the first 5-star in the series for me. I'm obsessed in every way. I don't need to say anything else about it. This is worth your time. If you're planning on reading the series, definitely read Heir of Fire, please. Yes, and then the next book is one that I think almost everybody I read, and that is, of course, Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the third book in the Empyrean series, which is the Fourth Wing series. This is one of those releases where they always come out on Tuesdays, and I'm always at work, and I always send my husband to Barnes & Noble to go pick them up, and he just waits in line with a bunch of women in their 20s and 30s ready to read books about dragons, and then it's just my husband standing there, and he's just a prince among men for doing that for me and bringing me home these special editions. But Onyx Storm obviously was highly anticipated by everybody, but highly anticipated in more of like a curious way, because I think Iron Flame was really disappointing compared to the first book, Fourth Wing, and so everybody was very skeptical about how Onyx Storm would do, and so I think expectations were a little bit more leveled or even a bit more negative than maybe they were for Iron Flame, just because we all kind of got burned. I know I went into it a little bit more mid, although I was still highly anticipating reading it. I personally think that because my expectations were more level for Onyx Storm, I was able to enjoy it more than I enjoyed Iron Flame. I still think that they're both huge step downs from Fourth Wing, and I'm really curious how the rest of the series is going to go. This ends on just a massive cliffhanger. A massive cliffhanger that also I didn't really fully understand at first because it was written kind of confusingly, and I remember having to go back and reread it and wrap my brain around what was happening. But overall, I was able to enjoy this just because I like the dragons, I like the universe. There was way less horrible miscommunication tropes between our two love interests. Iron Flame was so infuriating to me because it was just a bag of miscommunication, and I absolutely hated that. But this felt a little bit more level, and I hate to use this word because it's not totally true, but it's the only thing that I can think of. It was a little bit more mature, even though this is not a mature book. But I did enjoy it more than Iron Flame, certainly less than Fourth Wing. I think that I put this at like a 3.75 rating. Is it worth your time? I don't know. Honestly, this is a big maybe for me. I'm planning on reading the rest of the series for sure. I think the first book, Fourth Wing, is worth your time if you're into fantasy and if that's the type of book you typically enjoy reading. If this is not your genre, then I would stay very far away from this. If this is your genre, but you have higher standards than I do, maybe also stay away from it. But if you're looking for a fun time and you can kind of be more forgiving and graceful to some of the plot holes or some of the cringy writing, I think it's worth it. I think it's, it's fun. It can be fun. Okay, so now we're into the month of like February in 2025. The next book that I read was First Time Caller by B.K. Borisan. B.K. Borisan wrote the Lovelight Farms series, and that was more indie romance and smaller published. I have that whole series, but I remember not thinking that it got like a huge publication deal, and then First Time Caller was announced, and just the marketing for this was part of Book of the Month. It just felt like it blew up and it was at such a larger scale than Lovelight Farms ever was, which I think is really great, and I'm really happy for the author of kind of getting that chance to really dive into the bigger publishing world. I personally loved this book. I read it right around Valentine's Day. It's inspired by Sleepless in Seattle. Our main characters meet and talk over a radio show. That's their first interaction. And then Aiden, our main guy, brings Lucy, our main girl, onto the radio show to kind of do phone dating and see if they can find a date for Lucy. Obviously, they start to fall in love. This is one of my favorite confessions of love of all time. I think that the dialogue that B.K. Borisan writes is so realistic, and it actually sounds like real humans talking, which is something that I very rarely get in romance books specifically. So whenever I do get something like that, it's just so enjoyable to read. I don't care how outlandish the plot is. I don't care if there are plot holes. I don't care if something insane is happening. If the dialogue feels realistic to me, the characters feel real to me, and I'm very, very invested. This ended up being a 5-star for me. I think a lot of people don't like this book though. A lot of the reviews I've seen or people I've seen talking about it think that it's really overhyped. So maybe I'm just adding to the cacophonous noise of people that are hyping this book up. I don't care. I really, really enjoyed it. I would say that it's worth your time, although again, go in more level-headed than me. There are people that don't like this book for various reasons. Make an informed decision by yourself, but I would say don't write it off just because some people didn't like it. I think this book definitely deserves a chance for you to form your own opinions about it. Next up, wow, this is another book that I feel like I've talked about a lot, and it feels so far away from when I read it that I actually thought that I read it in 2024, and that's not the case. I read it in 2025, and that is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is my first Kristen Hanna book that I've ever read. I've always been interested in reading her books, and I think The Nightingale was just kind of the obvious choice to pick up because from what I've seen on the internet, online, Book Talk, Bookstagram, whatever, this book is the most talked about from what I've seen personally, and so I just kind of made the conclusion that it's sort of her most popular. It became her most popular book. Not necessarily her best book, but very, very, very popular. So read The Nightingale, and I think that my expectations were so high for this one. So incredibly high. This takes place in World War II. It focuses on two sisters that kind of take different strategies of aiding the war effort. They're both French, and so they're kind of on that end of the German occupation. And again, both of these sisters sort of take different routes for how they engage in the war. And I thought that that was really interesting. But this book was just so hyped up. And I went into it expecting it to wreck me, because that's what everybody said. I expected it to just be something that I couldn't get over. I thought it was going to be so emotionally charged that maybe even it would put me in a reading slump afterwards. And I kind of got to the end of it and was like, that was a really good book. I'm really glad that I read it, but it did not make that big of an impact on me. I don't think that it's as good as everybody says. I actually think the writing in a lot of ways is very weak. She wrote this a long time ago. This book is not new by any means. And so I think that there's plenty of time and room for Kristen Hanna to have improved. And I've heard that her newer books that come out recently, the writing is a lot stronger. I'm planning on reading maybe one of the newer ones to see if that's the case. But in this particular book, it was hard to follow sometimes. The timelines got mixed up. I think it was really repetitive. And maybe that comes down on Kristen Hanna, but also I think it just would have benefited from having a really good editor and just chopping some sections here, because it's like, it has all the makings of a good book, good characters, good plot, good setting, good writing at times, but it just got too big and too convoluted. And because of where my expectations were, because of everybody hyping it up, I was really disappointed in this book, honestly. That being said, it's still probably a 3.75, maybe even a 4 stars. Like, I really enjoyed it. Just because it's honestly one of my most disappointing reads of the year doesn't mean that I didn't really like it and was still able to enjoy it. It's just that my expectations were here and I really got brought down to like here. I think it's worth your time to read it. I just think that you should be careful about how everybody talks about it on the internet and just try to go into it with a little bit more level expectations. And I think that this would be a really enjoyable read because of that. Next, I read A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. The only other Adrienne Young book that I had read up until this point was The Unmaking of June Farrow, and I really enjoyed that book. So I was excited to read this one just because I trusted her as an author. This is kind of more of like a classic mystery book, maybe with like a little bit of a fantasy twist. That's kind of Adrienne Young's niche, honestly. This book takes place in a really small town. A sister comes back to this town looking for news about her brother. And basically the one thing that I really remember about this book, because to be honest, I don't remember a ton about it, but the main thing is that I remember reading this book and thinking that it just felt like a really predictable episode of NCIS or some crime show. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because I really like those types of shows, the Bones or NCIS or whatever else is out there. This just felt like it literally could have been one episode of that. And I think I mean that as a compliment. I think. But it was pretty predictable. And because of how much I loved June Farrow, I think I was expecting to like this a little bit more, but I still did really enjoy it. I think I rated this a 3.5. I think it's worth your time, especially if you like Adrienne Young, but maybe don't go into it expecting for it to be level with some of her other books. I do think that it's worth your time though, if you really like that small town mystery feel, or if you like NCIS. Back to Throne of Glass, Queen of Shadows. It's a 5-star. I really enjoy it. I enjoyed this one actually a lot more than I remember enjoying it the first time around. This book has one of the most explosive endings of any fantasy book that I can remember reading ever. It's so good. I love it. Yeah, read it. Read Throne of Glass. Moving on. The next book I read was A Song to Drown Rivers. This is a fantasy book that's kind of inspired by Chinese folklore, and I really, really enjoyed the setting of this book. The writing is very whimsical and ethereal, and the setting that we're in just makes everything feel very dreamy. It follows our main character, who is supposed to be one of the most beautiful women in her province and in her land, and she's chosen to go be a concubine for the king of this territory, all in the midst of this political war and intrigue, and she's going in as a spy to try and get information for the other side. I would say that this is a fantasy book that's really, really heavily political, and I personally enjoyed that in this case. It's a standalone fantasy, which I feel like is harder to find more often than not. It's also not super, super long, but the setting is so rich, the characters are amazing, and I just really, really liked all the politics in it. I definitely think that this is worth your time to read it, especially especially if you're just looking for a very beautiful read. It honestly is very slow, not in a boring way, but just in a pacing way where everything takes its time. And that means that a lot of tension can build towards the end. And so the ending feels very, very satisfying, if that makes sense, because you're just waiting up until this point for so long because the author really has you exactly where she wants you. Highly recommend this one, especially if you like this type of writing style that I'm describing. There's a beautiful romance in it as well. The whole thing is just really, really lovely and gorgeous, and I loved it. Next up, I read Heartless Hunter. I actually wasn't really planning on reading this duology, except that the second book to this duology, Rebel Witch, came out right around the time that I ended up reading this, and I read it out of more curiosity because everybody was so excited about Rebel Witch, and everybody was saying that Rebel Witch was just an insanely good book. And I kind of remember going into it a bit defiantly, like, is it a good book? Is this just the internet hyping it up because I've been burned before? I'll give it a shot, sort of thing. And so I read Heartless Hunter to kind of start on that. This is about a witch and a witch hunter. What I wasn't expecting was for it to take place more in the Regency style. I guess with most fantasy books, I expect not to recognize a timeline that we're in and a world that we're in. I expect it to just be like something completely new and different. And that really wasn't the case with Heartless Hunter. We're kind of in like Regency England. Like we're in London society is what it feels like, almost Bridgerton-like, where all of the fine ladies are coming out for their seasons and there's carriages and there's a lot of political intrigue that goes into that. And then all of a sudden there's like witches and witch hunters as well. And that was unexpected. I think that that meant that the world building was honestly really shallow, but I don't think that the author really focused on the world. That wasn't the point of this fantasy book. The point of it was the characters and the plot. And I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There are some series or books that put so much emphasis on the world building and a new fantasy world, and that's also sometimes amazing. And I really, really enjoy that sometimes. There's pros and cons to both sides of it. I think in this case, it worked out in this book's favor. It just was a really fast, easy, fun read. A great romance. This is like a true enemies to lovers. I feel like enemies to lovers has gotten a little bit diluted recently. This is like true enemies to lovers. He's hunting her to kill her because she's a witch. I don't know, it was great. I really enjoyed it. I think I rated this a 4-star. This I remember was trending to be 5-star, like really, really trending to be 5-star. I didn't love the ending though, but because it's the first in a series, I can kind of forgive it of like, okay, well, that's going to be addressed or wrapped up in the next book. And so it didn't make me dislike the book, but I do remember it feeling like, oh, this was so close to a 5-star. I'm going to knock it down to a 4-star, like maybe a 4.5 or something like that. But I think that it's worth your time, especially if you're looking for just a fast, really engaging fantasy read. Go for it. But before I read Rebel Witch, I did a quick pit stop at Andromeda. I don't know why. I think I got this from Book of the Month and I really loved the cover, and I still love the cover. This is one of my favorite covers of the year, personally. I think it's just really, really pretty. I would hang this in my house, this painting, if it was accessible to me. And it was really, really short, and I was like, why not? Let's just do it. There's really nothing to say about this book. It's kind of just about a woman. Yeah. I don't remember a ton about it. I remember being very unimpressed by the story, but impressed by the writing. I think the writing was really beautiful, but I did get to the end of the book and really wonder what was trying to be said. It didn't necessarily feel like a waste of time because it took so little time to read this book. It's so short. It's not even 200 pages. It's like 180 pages. And so it didn't take a lot of time from me, but if it was any longer, I think I would have DNF'd it because it just wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't getting more connected with the characters. There was hardly a story. It felt kind of more like a vignette of just a character. Nothing was really likable about it, except the writing was really, really impressive and beautiful to me. So it kind of all evened out. Again, the only reason that I liked this as much as I did was because it's so short. If it was longer, I think I would have started to trend very negative towards it. But I did just land in the middle at like a 3-star. This is one of those books that I got to the end of and I was just like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to talk about this book. I don't know why I would talk about this book. It's not that it's bad, so I don't want to rate it less than 3, but I didn't really like it, so I don't want to rate it more than 3. So this is incredibly average, and I don't think that you need to read it. I would say that this is not worth your time personally, even though it doesn't take much time to read it. And then we're right back into it with Rebel Witch. I loved Rebel Witch. This again is part of the Heartless Hunter I guess it's called the Crimson Moth duology. I remember really distinctly, I've talked about this a couple times, but reading this book, and I'm sitting on my bed reading it, and I'm about to go to the movie theater and I have to leave really soon, and I had that feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave. I do not want to leave my bed right now. I want to just read until I can finish this book because I'm so into it right now. And unfortunately I did end up leaving, and I say unfortunately because we went to see the live action Snow White and that was a mistake, but then I came back and finished the book and everything was okay. I just was captivated by this book, these two characters, the romance, everything that happened. I rated this book a 4.5. I don't think it's the most incredible fantasy duology of all time, but I was just so into it. I think the writing is super engaging. It's simple enough that you can read it really quickly, which means you can get to the plot really quickly. You get to the juicy stuff that keeps you wanting to read more and more and more. And especially at the time, I think this was sometime in March, that's exactly what I was looking for, and it's exactly what I got. So I really liked this book. I liked the duology as a whole, and I definitely think that it's worth your time if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, the next book that I read was a memoir called The Tell. I don't rate those. It's incredible though, and I highly recommend that everybody read it. And then what I read after that was Betting on You by Lynn Painter. I had read two other Lynn Painter books at this point. One of them was Better Than the Movies, and one of them was Happily Never After, I think is what it's called. Both romance books. Better Than the Movies is a young adult romance book though, and I think Happily Never After is an adult romance book. I really liked Better Than the Movies. I think I rated that about a 4, but I remember being really surprised by how much I liked it. Happily Never After, I just thought was a piece of nothing. There's nothing there. Like, I feel nothing towards that book. So I was curious where Betting on You was gonna fall, because I've heard that a lot of people like this one, and I really didn't like this one. This is also a young adult romance. It kind of goes back to her roots. Where Betting on You for a young adult romance, I remember being really surprised by how deep it got with the characters and the characters' issues that they were struggling with. This one I remember being really surprised by how shallow it was and how much I didn't like the characters, how cringy the dialogue was, how terrible the plot was. I was really not expecting to dislike this book so much, because I feel like even with Happily Never After, it was just very mid. This I actually think went into, I kind of dislike this book, honestly. This has like the fake dating trope. It's also these two characters bickering that girls and guys can't be friends, which then ends up being proven correct because they both have feelings for each other, but then the fake dating thing happens, and then there's miscommunication that happens, and I just didn't like it. I think I rated this a 2-star. I personally don't think that this is worth your time, but I would not say that that is a reflection of Lynn Painter as an author. Totally. And then we get into another book of the year that was highly, highly anticipated by everybody and their mother was reading this. Maybe not their mother. I don't know if it's too spicy for their mother, but next was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. I was very excited for this book, highly anticipating it, because Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez was really high up there in my favorite books of 2024. And so I was just so excited for this one, because I guess I just got a little starry-eyed and I didn't think that Abby Jimenez could do any wrong, even though we don't have that long of a history as far as reader-author relationships go at that point. But I was very excited for this. I read this in one sitting, I think. It took me a couple hours. Very easy read. This follows our two main characters, basically like a star-crossed lovers thing, where at the beginning of the book they have the world's best date and essentially fall in love with each other instantly. I don't usually love the insta-love trope. What is happening? I'm not a huge fan of insta-love, but Abby Jimenez wrote this date and wrote these two characters so well in the first couple of chapters that I was like, yeah, I mean, like, if that were me, I would fall in love instantly as well. I was so convinced that these characters had fallen in love so quickly that it didn't really bother me, surprisingly, which is impressive, honestly. But then they get separated because one of them moves away to be with her ailing mother in California, and the other one, he has this vet business that he just opened up that he can't leave because he has sunk so much money into it, and you don't start turning a profit at a veterinary clinic for quite a few years, so he would basically go bankrupt if he left. So it literally just becomes this, like, okay, you guys are soulmates and you literally literally are on opposite sides of the country and you can't be together. What's going to happen? And that kind of sets up the plot and everything else that happens in the story. I really like the writing. Like I said, these characters were so convincing to me that they were in love that I just wanted them to be together. That's all I wanted. I think that this was a bit of emotional warfare though, because it's just so sad and everything keeps going wrong to a point that felt too much for me. It was just like, okay, I can't catch a break. These characters can't catch a break. It feels like you're digging us into an emotional hole just so that when they inevitably find their happy ending at the end of this book, because it's a romance book and that's going to happen and that was my expectation, and spoiler alert, it does. But you're digging us into such a deep hole just because you want the ending to feel better, but it feels like we passed a certain point where it just like doesn't matter how much more happens. Like we're there, we're depressed, we're sad, stop piling more stuff onto it, and just more stuff kept piling on. I didn't love that, but I did still enjoy this book. It just didn't reach my expectations, and that's on me. That's definitely my issue for having them so high. I think I ended up rating this a 3.75, maybe a 4-star, but honestly spending more time away from it, I think I would trend more 3.75, 3.5. I do think it's worth your time though, just because it's a nice romance book. Abby Jimenez is a good writer and it's nice to read in the summer. I love a good romance book in the summer, but not necessarily a high priority, I would say. Take that as you will. Next, I read Beartown by Frederick Backman. Very excited to read this one. This is another one where I keep saying this and it always ends up biting me, but everybody was hyping this up so much that my expectations were pretty high when it came to Beartown. But this is one of those times where it did not disappoint me. I loved this book so much. This is a book that focuses on a small town, a small hockey town. Their entire world just revolves around this hockey team, and tragedy strikes the hockey team, and it's kind of about how the town responds to it, and things get really divisive and sides need to be taken when it comes to the team and the players on the team. And it was just really, really interesting. It's different from a lot of Frederick Backman books that I have now read because I think there's not really one main character. It's like the town itself is the main character, and we're just kind of standing there observing each different character as they process this news, as they go through this trauma. And I thought it was just written so brilliantly. I loved this book. This was an easy 5 stars for me, and I definitely think that you should read it. Totally worth your time. I have not read the other 2 books in the Beartown series. I think that you can read this as a standalone and not feel compelled to read the next 2 books. Honestly, it felt very conclusive to me, but I have heard that the next 2 books are amazing, and so I want to read them. I think just because it didn't really end on much of a cliffhanger though, I am not really motivated to read them yet. Not that I don't want to, I'm just not super motivated yet, but one day I think I will get to them. And then we move on to the next big anticipated release that everybody read and their mother last year. Maybe not their mothers once again, but it was Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. This is another one, kind of like First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, where I think people don't really like this book that much. I haven't seen a ton of people talking about it, but I do think that people were really disappointed by it and didn't love it as much as they typically love an Emily Henry book. And I gotta say, I don't get it because I loved this book. This is actually one that I would really like to reread, but I remember the first time that I read it that I was questioning whether or not it was my favorite Emily Henry book, which says a lot because I feel very solidified in my ranking. And then when I read this, it just kind of shook the whole thing up. This follows another writer, although not really like about a book as much. She's more of a journalist, and how she wants to write the life story of this very famous older woman. She wasn't even really an actress. She was just kind of part of like this really famous Hollywood family that disappeared after a while, after years of tragedy and scandal and all this stuff. And then one day our main character gets the opportunity to potentially write her life story, but she is up against another writer, and that ends up being the love interest. What's going on, girl? I don't know. I just loved this. I think that maybe if I had to guess why people don't like it as much is because it doesn't feel like one of her classic romance books. There is, I mean, it's romance. There's a lot of romance in this book, but I wouldn't say that it feels like the main plot point, which is different for Emily Henry, who is a romance writer. But I kind of loved that. It felt like there was a little bit of mystery. It felt like there was a character study of this older woman from Hollywood. It felt like it was a lot more literary fiction than just just a romance book, but again, still had really great romance and great characters. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was an easy 5 stars. And then afterwards I was like, why don't people like this book? And I still guess I don't really understand it, but to each their own. Personally though, I definitely think it's worth your time and I think you should read it. I always get to this point and I'm like, I need to speed up. I'm going way too slow. Okay, but next I did a tandem read of Tower of Dawn and Empire of Storms. I mostly did them as audiobooks because I just felt like I was at a place where I would never be able to get through these books if I read them physically. So I mostly read these books on audiobook, but I did do the tandem read, which was really fun and definitely an interesting experiment. I have to say though, I would not recommend the tandem read if it's your first time reading Throne of Glass because it was sometimes hard to follow. I don't think it necessarily enhanced the experience for me, but it was fun. Just don't do it if it's your first time. I think I rated both of these 4-star. Very enjoyable, had a lot of fun. Almost done with Throne of Glass. Next, I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This book really put me into a rage. I hated this book. I didn't like the story. I didn't like the main character at all. She was so annoying. And I honestly think that it comes down to her being written by a man and this man not knowing how women think or would react in certain situations. And it made it so much worse given the fact that this is first person perspective because you're in the character's thoughts. You're hearing what she's thinking in the exact moment that she's thinking it, and she's so stupid and it really pissed me off. I thought that the plot of this could have been something good, but the writing was just so infuriating to me that I really couldn't stand it, and I think I rated this a 2-star. I don't personally think this is worth your time. So then I needed a nice cool down and I read The Days at the Morisaki Bookshop. This was just for all of the cozy vibes. This is a translated book. It follows our main character who kind of goes through a big life change and needs to take a breath. So she quits her job. She moves in with her uncle who owns the Morisaki Bookshop and she starts helping him run it. And doing that, she discovers a love of reading and she meets all of these interesting people, and the whole thing is just very cozy, very slow, very easy to read, and very short. And it just was like a perfect palate cleanser. I think these types of books are exactly what I want to read after I've read something infuriating, or if I've just finished a really big series and I don't know what to move on to next. This literally just feels like a palate cleanser and I enjoy that a lot. I think this one did just tiptoe right into being a little bit boring, but again, it's so short. This is the shortest book that I read this year. It didn't really have time to be boring because it's so short, but I think if it was any longer, I would have started to get bored. I wouldn't say it is or isn't worth your time. I think there are a lot of similar books to this that are in the same kind of healthy fiction genre. One of them was one of my favorite books from last year, Welcome to the Hunan Dong Bookshop. I think that one is one that I would recommend before I'd recommend this one, but not necessarily that you shouldn't read this. I just think there may be some better ones before you get to this one. After that, I read The Foxwife, and I really enjoyed this one. This is one with a super unique fantasy world and magic system. It kind of focuses on our main character who is, at the core of it, she's out for revenge, and slowly you sort of learn why she's out for revenge and why she's looking to go after this person that wronged her, but we're also kind of getting another side of the coin, this human that is trying to solve this mystery, and our main woman kind of ties into the mystery, and it all takes place against this beautiful Asian folklore backdrop. It really goes into like East Asian, South Asian, lots of different territories, and folklore inspiration was taken for just the setting of this world, and I super enjoyed that. I think it was written really, really well. This one is a bit slow to get into, but once you get about halfway, it just kind of is something that flies by, and I remember becoming really riveted by it. It just took a little bit to get into it, but I'm very happy that I ended up reading this book. I rated it a 4-star, and this is similar to A Song to Drown Rivers, I think, the way that I feel about them, where the writing is just so beautiful. They're both a little bit slow, but in a way that just adds so much tension that keeps you really, really engaged with the story and with the characters. So I would definitely recommend this book if you haven't read it already. Hey there. Hi. Okay. Then I read a Kindle book called You Belong With Me by Mari McFarlane. I had heard a lot about Mari McFarlane and I was interested in reading one of her romance books. I remember trying to go to a bookstore a couple times and looking for if she had any physical copies of her books in store, and I wasn't able to find any. So then I just went to Kindle, and I remember looking at all of the plot lines and the synopsises and just choosing whichever one sounded the best to me. And I chose You Belong With Me, not knowing that it is a direct sequel to a book that comes before it. So I was kind of just just like dropped into the middle of this book, and there was a lot of stuff that I didn't have context for. To be fair, in the book's defense, I was right in the middle of something that I had no business of being right in the middle of. But even still, there's a lot of context that you can gain just by reading what's happening. And so I didn't feel like I was missing a lot, except maybe time with some of the characters. But overall, I really didn't like it. I didn't like the writing. I didn't care about the relationship at all. And I'm sure there's a lot that I missed from the first book that would maybe make me feel a little bit more engaged with the relationship, but also probably not by the end of it. I'm not super interested in picking up another Mari McFarlane book to try it out, but also I do recognize that's my bad. I picked up a sequel and I shouldn't have done that and probably shouldn't have read it at all. But personally, I rated it a 2-star and I don't think it's worth your time to read. Sorry. The next book I read after that was What the River Knows. I love this cover so much. It's one of the main reasons that I picked up this book. This is a fantasy duology. I have not read the second book yet because I honestly didn't love the first book a ton. This one is very, very mid for me because in some ways I really liked our main characters. I actually really liked the romance plotline of this book. The setting takes place in Egypt, so it has a lot of Egyptian folklore and mythology tied into it, which is also something that I really loved. But I have to say, this entire book, to sum it up, is all drama and no plot, and that's about it. So I rated this a 3-star just because there's things that I did really like about it, but when it came to the actual plot of the book, I didn't really like anything about it. So it kind of just equaled out to the middle at a 3-star, and I haven't read the second book in this duology, so it is hard to give my stamp of like, is this worth your time? Because I don't really know if it's worth your time being part of a duology. So I am going to abstain from answering. Okay, I think we're about halfway. The next book I read was My Friends by Frederick Backman. And spoiler alert, this was my favorite book of the year. Easily. This is a 6+ star read for me. I absolutely loved it. Frederick Backman is easily becoming one of my favorite authors, and I think his writing style just shines here. The characters are so deep and emotional. It's about this painting that kind of brings so many people together and connects so many people over different decades, honestly. It's about art and the legacy that we leave behind and how our friends tie into that. It is really emotional. I was sobbing by the end of it. Just one of the most beautiful books that I've read. I can't say enough good things about it, and I know that I will just ramble on and on and on about how much I love it, so I'm going to cut it off here. This is the best book of the year for me, and I highly recommend it, and I think everybody should read it. And then I read Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood. I don't know why. I think that I just saw so many people being really excited to read this book, and similarly to Rebel Witch, I was like going into it a bit defiantly, where I kind of wanted to find something wrong with it. I also was really curious about Ali Hazelwood. The only other book that I had read of hers up to this point was The Love Hypothesis, and that was a while ago, so I don't remember a ton about it, but I remember it feeling pretty mid. But to be fair, I think that was before I really started getting into romance, so I sort of wanted to give Ali Hazelwood a chance, and I also really wanted to read one of her books as it was being published, because every time I've picked up an Ali Hazelwood book or considered picking one up, it's been out for a long time, so there's all these different opinions about it already. And so this one had just been published, and I was like, okay, this is my chance to like really get in there, form my own opinions before I see what other people have been saying. This is an age gap romance, and I didn't like it. I remember reading this book and being really frustrated because I actually think that Ali Hazelwood's writing was so strong. I remember just being so impressed by her writing, which is something that I don't remember from The Love Hypothesis, probably because it was just so long ago that I read it. But I was so impressed with her writing. I just personally didn't love the age gap romance. I didn't love the characters or the plot line at all, and I just wasn't invested in it. But I do remember I got to the end of it and was like, I think I need to give another chance to Ali Hazelwood with characters that I actually care about and a story that I'd be more invested in. I think I ended up rating this a 3-star, especially out of Ali Hazelwood books. I think that this is definitely towards the bottom of the list, at least for me, from the ones that I've read, but even just romance in general, I don't think that this one is necessarily worth your time. Maybe that's just my preference. I didn't really like the plot at all, and I didn't love the age gap romance. So if that's your thing, then maybe you would love it, but I wasn't a huge fan. And then I read Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, another one of the most anticipated books of the year for me and for a lot of people. This follows one of the first women to go to space and join the NASA space program. fictionally. The main character didn't actually go to space because she doesn't exist, but it is in that time period and kind of in that point of history. This book ended up being really disappointing for me because I was so excited about it. And I think what it came down to is it honestly wasn't long enough, which is not something that I say very often. A lot of times I'll complain that a book ended up being too long and could have been shorter and cut down a little bit. But in this case, I think there was so much going on. We had a lot of subplots that were taking up space that I wish would have been given to, well, space. We had the space plot where she's training to become one of the first women in space. We had a romance subplot, and then we had a family drama subplot. And all three of these came together, and I think none of them really got enough time to develop, and all of them felt rushed because they were all competing for words, if that makes sense. I wish that it would have been cut down to just the space program and just the romance subplot, or just the space program and just the family drama subplot, because all of them were really compelling and interesting, but because the book isn't super long, it just felt like we didn't get enough time for each plot to develop. And so it was really disappointing for me because I just was very, very excited to read this book. I think I rated it at 3.5. It still is good and enjoyable. It's just not as good as I wanted it to be. It's also not as good as I think it could have been, personally. And I know I'm in the minority here. I've watched a lot of wrap-ups this year, and everybody is really putting this high at the top of their lists, which is great. I'm so glad that this book did well and that people are enjoying it. I just wish I could have enjoyed it more than I did. Then I read Wild Dark Shore, which is another one that people are putting really high at the top of their list for their 2025 wrap-ups. I gotta say, I don't get it. This feels like a really overhyped book to me, and I don't really know how to talk about it, to be honest. I think that the mystery wasn't as strong as everybody said that it was going to be. It's one of those things where the author put so much work and effort into the feel of the book and the atmosphere of the book, but left out a lot of key things for the plot and the characters, where I was feeling a lot, but mostly just because we were in like a spooky place and the setting was spooky and like weird things were happening, and so I felt unsettled and on edge. But then when you really think about the plot of what happened and the characters and how they responded to stuff and the ending, I hated the ending, and that's what everybody said was so cool. It felt really out of nowhere and unnecessary and confusing. And again, I think I'm in the deep minority with this one, but I just can't get on board with Wild Dark Shore. I think it was just so middle of the road where there were good things about it. I think the setting was, again, it really contributed to how I was feeling within the book. The writing was pretty strong. I was intrigued about the characters and the plot in the beginning, but the longer that I read, the more it just kept going downhill for me. And by the end of it, especially the way that the ending went, I just didn't really care anymore. So I think I rated this a 3-star. In my opinion, it's not worth the read, but again, I think that it's just not my type of book. And if you were to ask somebody else, they would tell you definitely you should go read it. So take that as you will and maybe go find out for yourself. Okay, and then I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This was in an effort to try Ali Hazelwood again because, like I said, from Problematic Summer Romance, I think that I really liked her writing style. I just didn't like the characters and the plot of that specific book. So I wanted to give different characters and a different plot a better chance at seeing if I liked Ali Hazelwood. And I think it really paid off. I actually super enjoyed this book more than I was expecting. I liked these characters a lot more. I liked the struggles they had to go through. Obviously, Ali Hazelwood's thing is that she writes about women in STEM, and I think that that main subplot and the scientific things that were going on was really fascinating to me. I'm not going to go into huge detail about everything that was going on because we don't have that kind of time in this video, but I really, really liked that. The romance was good and convincing. I think Ali Hazelwood also writes very convincing dialogue like B.K. Borison, so I was just very into it, and it made me want to read more Ali Hazelwood books because it kind of proved where Problematic Summer Romance I didn't really like. It gave me the theory that I think I could like Ali Hazelwood books, I just didn't pick the right one. And so yeah, I like this one. I ended up rating it a 4-star, and I'm excited to read more Ali Hazelwood books. And then I read Last House by Jessica Satuk. This is a historical fiction, and the way that the synopsis made me think it was gonna go was that it kind of follows a house through generations of this one particular family. And so I was sort of expecting the setting to be in one place, and I was sort of expecting to follow this family more throughout their time together and learn what this house and what this home really meant to them, and how are they different when they're in the home versus out of the home, and how are their relationships over the years. And you know, it just didn't go that way at all. And honestly, the house, the aforementioned last house is barely in the book, which was confusing to me. The beginning of it was interesting because we're kind of following the parents, and then the middle of the book kind of follows the children, and then the end of the book follows the children when they're older, and then the very, very, very end of the book you see like generations of these kids. I think it was really boring though. In the beginning I was excited about it. Honestly, the first 100 pages I read really quickly because I was very excited about it. It was a historical fiction. I don't read a ton of historical fiction, but it did grip me. And then once we got past like 100 pages, 150 pages, it got so slow and boring. And again, it just wasn't what I was expecting at all. The plot barely focused on the last house in any way. And this is one of those books where I got to the end of it and I was just like, this is not for me. I think maybe I just read a good book, but it wasn't for me and I didn't like it. That doesn't mean it's a bad book, and it doesn't mean that you might not like reading it, especially if you enjoy slower historical fiction, but it wasn't for me. I think I ended up rating this at 2.5 stars. Moving quickly. Okay. The next book that I read was Murder Takes a Vacation by Laura Lippman. This book, very short, very easy to read and get through very quickly. It was a perfect summer read. It follows this older woman who is somehow accidentally swept up into a murder plot and a mystery plot. It's a humorous book. Like, there's nothing really serious about it. It's funny. I was smiling and kind of giggling the whole time. I don't think that there was a full laugh out loud moment necessarily, only because though my tonic level of enjoyment, I was just constantly amused. It's a very amusing book, especially our main character being like in her 70s and going abroad to Europe for the first time, accidentally getting swept up in this big mystery and trying to solve a murder. It felt very Agatha Christie-like, but maybe a little bit more modern than Agatha Christie, and just silly. It was silly and fun, all in a very positive way. Super quick and easy to read. Kind of shallow maybe, but it was exactly what you wanted to read like in the height of summer. I want something quick and fast that's maybe not a romance book, and I don't want a mystery book that's really dark and depressing, and I don't want a really thick, intense fantasy book, and I don't want an existential crisis literary book. And then the only thing left was Murder Takes a Vacation, and it paid off. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend that people read that in 2026. Add it to your TBRs, but specifically I think it was great to read in summer. So think about that as you're planning your year. Next I read P.S. I Hate You by Lauren Connolly. This is a book where I read the synopsis and I thought I had an idea of how the plot was going to go, and then it went a very different direction, but in a positive way. What I mean by that is our two main characters here go on a road trip, and that's kind of the whole mechanism for them falling in love in this book. Our female main character's brother dies, and he happens to be our male main character's best friend, and the brother's last will asks for these two to go on a road trip and spread his ashes across the country. And so when I initially read that synopsis, I was like, okay, so it's maybe going to take place around like 2 weeks. They're going to be in a car the whole time, forced proximity, executing this brother's last will and testament. But actually, it wasn't one single road trip. This book actually took place over like 2 years. Different seasons, different months where they're planning these individual trips to go spread the brother's ashes across the country. And I liked that so much more because once again, it kind of made it feel more realistic, where these characters are not falling in love just in like a quick 2 weeks, which is fine. And sometimes I love that, but like they're spending years together going through this difficult time together. And so you see them grow, you see them get over their conflicts, you see them learn to have compassion and forgiveness for each other, have fun with each other, make each other laugh, and like really grow as friends first. And I thought that that was written really well and done really well, and I enjoyed it a lot. I think the only thing with this book is it just was a little bit long. I think it could be 50 to 100 pages shorter and you wouldn't have lost a ton of the plot or the emotional depth of it. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I rated it 4 stars, and I think it's a great romance book for you to add to your 2026 TBR. Then I read These Summer Storms by Sarah McLean. This was kind of like a impulse book of the month pickup where I had picked this book for the month, and honestly, a lot of times I do not read the book of the month in the month that I actually get it. A lot of times it just sits on my shelf until I want to read it, and that's on being a mood reader. But this is one that I read the same month that I got it, and I ended up really, really enjoying it. It's technically a romance book, but I have to say most of this book didn't feel like a romance book at all. It felt more like a family drama literary book, and I really, really enjoyed it. It follows our main character who goes to this island to hear the reading of her father's will. I guess there's a lot of people dying in the last couple of books. But they're a very rich family. There's a lot of drama. They all kind of hate each other and they're just very money motivated. And the dad's will kind of forces them to like be competitive with each other and play these games, but they all have to stay on the island for a week and they can't leave and they all have to complete these tasks. And so you're following each family member as they're completing these tasks and not really wanting to do it, and everybody's mad at each other. And it just felt like a lot of family drama, but honestly, I really enjoyed it. I liked the setting a lot. It was a fun summer read. It was a quick summer read. There is romance in it for sure. And again, I think this is a romance book, but it just didn't feel fully like a romance book to me. It felt more like it focused on other characters and the family as a whole being the focus. Overall, I really liked it. I think the writing was really strong and it was a fun read. I rated this 4-star and I think it's worth your time. Next, I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. The second book to this, it's not like a direct sequel. I guess it technically is, but you can read them as standalones. Came out this year, called One Golden Summer. And I really wanted to read that one. And I figured I should read this one first. And everybody really liked One Golden Summer. I don't know exactly how people felt about Every Summer After, but I guess I kind of assumed that they liked it. And it was a short romance book. I figured I could get through it really quickly. I did not like this book very much at all. It follows our main character as she grows up living on this lake during her summer months. And the neighbor boys she becomes really close with, one of them she falls in love with, and they kind of have this teenage love story. And then something happens, something goes wrong, and they don't speak to each other for years. And then she comes back all of these years later and they have to see if they can make it work. And it was fine. I don't think the writing was really strong. I didn't care about the characters. There was a lot of descriptive writing about the romance of these two main characters, but when they're like 14 and 15, and I felt kind of uncomfortable by how detailed we were getting for such young characters personally, so I sort of skimmed a little bit of stuff. And even as they were adults, I just don't think that they made a lot of sense. I'm not a huge fan of the friends to lovers trope. Sometimes I like it, but most of the time I'm not a huge fan of it. This is one of those cases where I really didn't like it. Yeah, I'm not gonna spend any more time on this one because we have to get through these other ones, but I think I landed at like a 2 or a 2.5. I still want to read One Golden Summer because that focuses on older characters. I think I would like the plot a little bit more and I would like the characters a little bit more. I personally don't think that this one is worth your time though. I rated this like a 2 or a 2.5. Next, I read Anxious People by Frederick Backman. This is in an effort to get through as many Frederick Backman books as I possibly can because I just adore him. And this was no exception. I absolutely loved Anxious People. I thought it was such a fun and unique plot. It's about this main character who is really down in the dumps and really, really needs money, and in an effort to rob a bank, fails and then holds all of these people hostage at an apartment viewing. And then you kind of learn everybody that's at the apartment, and like our robber doesn't really want to be a robber and doesn't really want to hold these people hostage. And then they all kind of like come together and realize how similar everybody is, even though they're all in different places in their life, their demographic, their age, their race. And it was just really beautifully written. I think Frederick Backman is just a genius. This, to be honest, might be my least favorite book that I've read of his, but that being said, it was still an easy 4 stars and I still really liked it and think it's worth your time to read. And then I read Kingdom of Ash and it crushed me once again, and it once again proved that it's amazing and a million stars. And then I read Outlawed, which is a book that's been on my shelf for a very long time, and it was not at all what I was expecting. I think the plot and premise of this is really unique. One of the most unique books that I read this year, but overall I didn't enjoy it, if that makes sense. It kind of follows our main character who's part of this Western town, where in this Western town, their religion is that if you are not having children by the age of like 16, 17, then you're a witch and you're going to be burned alive. And it's really focused on that and childbearing. And our main character can't have children even though she tries really hard. And so she runs away and she joins this gang full of scorned women who can't have children. And then this gang just robs people and lives together, and that's it. And it was really weird. And again, not at all what I was expecting. Props for uniqueness. I don't think I'll ever forget this book, but I didn't enjoy it. I think I rated this like a 2 or a 2.5. I don't know if it's worth your time because, again, didn't enjoy it, but also I love telling people about this book because I think it's so weird. So maybe if that sounds interesting to you at all, you should read it. But if it's not your type of book, then don't force it for sure. Next up, I read Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, which is the final book in the Emily Wilde's trilogy. And it was great. great. It was super solid. I love the trilogy as a whole. I think this is the first book that really introduced me to cozy fantasy. It's all written from the perspective of Emily Wilde as if she's writing in her diary or her field notes. She's very analytical, she's very logical, very serious, and a lot of characters around her know that about her and are very kind of fun and sarcastic and make fun of her for it. But because everything's from Emily Wilde's perspective, she's not really getting it, but like us as the reader kind of get the tone. I've talked about this series as a whole plenty. I think this was a great wrap up to it. I think that the series is worth your time, especially if you like that cozy fantasy, or if you've never read cozy fantasy and you're looking to get into it, this I think is the perfect place to start. So the third and final book in the trilogy was really, really great. I think I rated it a 4-star. And then I read another Kindle book, Miss Newberry's List. This was part of a book club pick from the book club that I'm in. This was a really, really fast, quick, sweet, cute Regency romance, and that's about it. I think I rated this a 3.5 star. I haven't read many Regency romances. This one felt very, very historically accurate though, which was fun, where I think a lot of them that I have read, they modernize some things or they try to modernize some things, which still works in the story, but this one just felt like a true historical fiction. It was very sweet, didn't make a huge impact, but it was great to read for the summer and the time that I read it. So if that's something that you're looking for and you want to read something really fast, that would be a great pick. And then the next book that I read was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is one that everybody's been telling me to read for so long, and because I had just discovered R.F. Kuang that year, I was really excited to dive into some more of her books, and I wanted to start with The Poppy War because I think that's probably some of her most famous works. I knew that there were a lot of trigger warnings for this though, and that was kind of some of the reasons that I delayed reading it for so long, but finally I was just like, let's just read it, let's do it. It was amazing. I loved this book, but I also hated it because honestly, the trigger warnings didn't really fully prepare me for what I was gonna read. There were some parts that were really difficult, and it did kind of sit with me in a negative way where I kind of walked away from reading that section or reading the book as a whole, and I felt really bogged down and really disturbed, and I wasn't really able to shake that, whereas some people I think can shake that stuff off really quickly. Even people that love watching horror movies, I don't think they love it because of the way that it makes them feel. I think they love it because of the adrenaline rush, and they're able to walk out of a movie theater or walk out afterwards and forget what they felt in the actual movie. I'm not really that way. It sticks with me a lot longer, which is why I sometimes have to be careful with what I watch or what I read, and why I was nervous about reading The Poppy War. And it ended up being kind of accurate to what I was thinking. It stuck with me, but in a very negative way. But at the same time, I loved this book. All of the other things that happened, our main character, the magic system, the world was so riveting and enjoyable, and I loved it, but I also hated it. And so I don't know if I'm gonna read the other two books because this one was so intense. I can't imagine going through that again, knowing what I know now, and I don't even know if the trigger warnings are the same for the other books. I have a very complicated relationship with this. I think that if you're interested in reading The Poppy War, definitely pursue that, but definitely be informed of what are some of the things that are gonna pop up in a way that I'm just like, don't even worry about spoilers, just don't worry about them. Just read what other people say, read the trigger warnings, be completely informed, and then go into it knowing what you're getting into, and I think you'd be able to enjoy it. But if you are at all concerned about some of the stuff that's in here and some of the content, that's fine. Stay away from it, don't read it, that's okay. Almost done. We're getting to the last round here. The next book that I read was Nothing Like the Movies because I needed something very lighthearted and happy after The Poppy War to lift me out of my depressive funk. So I read the next Lynn Painter book. This is the sequel to Better Than the Movies, and because I had just read Betting on You, I had tanked expectations. I was not expecting a lot from this, and that ended up working in my favor because I really liked this book. And maybe it was because I just needed something lighthearted to read, and it was just like the perfect book to read at the perfect time. But I like this one. I like this one more than I liked Better Than the Movies. Better Than the Movies follows our two main characters, Liz and Wes, as they're in high school, and in Nothing Like the Movies, they're in college, and I think that made it a bit easier for me to connect with them and feel invested with them because they had aged up a little bit. And obviously sometimes I have a hard time connecting with high schoolers at this point now that I'm older, which is such a weird thing to say. But I really liked this one. this is kind of like a second chance romance where they get together in the first book and then something happens and they're broken up. And at the beginning of this book, it's like, okay, how are they going to get back together kind of thing. And I thought it was really well written. Surprisingly, I liked it a lot. I think I ended up rating this a 4-star. And yeah, I think it's worth your time if that's exactly what you want to read. If you want to read a cute, cheesy, rom-com, young adult romance, this is a good one. Next, I read my first Lisa Jewell book. None of this is true. So many people had been recommending Lisa Jewell as a mystery author for me, but also this book in particular. And I already had it on my shelf from Book of the Month. So I was like, okay, yeah, why not? Let's read it. And I really liked it, actually. Surprisingly, this is one of the first mystery books that I read. And I was like, hey, we're doing good. I'm having a good time. And it kept that momentum towards the end. Crazy stuff happens, crazy, outlandish, unrealistic stuff happens, but that's going to happen in any sort of mystery book. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I think the writing was amazing. My favorite thing about this book is that it's in third person. And I think in mystery books specifically, that is something that I need, because a mystery or a thriller book, the circumstances that are happening, all of our characters, if it's first person, it's always like stupid thoughts happening in your brain. And I just don't want to be in their thoughts. I want to be kind of more of an outsider looking in versus a first perspective. I'm in the character's shoes in this intense situation. And so this is written in third person perspective. And that automatically made me like it a lot more than some of the other mystery books that I had read. Writing was solid. Plot was solid. The one thing about this book is that I feel like we got to the climax of the conflict really early. And I remember being like, wow, there's like 100 pages left right now. And this is it? Are we there right now? And we kind of were. And then it was the aftermath of the conflict and the twist that was then explained in the next 100 or so pages, which was an interesting way to have written that. And I still did really like it, but it wasn't what I was expecting. Overall, I really liked it. I think I rated it 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend this. And I really want to read more Lisa Jewell books, so tell me which one I should pick up next. Next, I read The Spell Shop. This was in October, I think, and The Spell Shop put me into a horrible reading slump. This book took me like 2 weeks to finish. It's a cozy fantasy, but cozy in a way that feels really boring. I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about the setting. I didn't really care about anything, and I didn't want to read the book, and yet I still powered through. And again, it took me like over 2 weeks, and I can't even think about this book anymore because of how much of a slump it put me in. I think I rated this like a 2.5 or something. But in an effort to get out of that reading slump, I read Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber, and I really, really liked this one. I think I rated this even like a 4.5. Not quite a 5-star, but we're close to it. And I think if anybody has read Caraval, Stephanie Garber's other young adult series, and enjoyed that, they would really enjoy this book. Caraval and Alchemy of Secrets, specifically those 2 books, not the series Caraval, because you have the other 2 books in the series, but book 1 of Caraval and Alchemy of Secrets feel really, really similar in a good way, in a positive way. And so I super, super enjoyed it. I didn't realize it was part of a series until I got to the end, and now I know it's part of a series, and I am anxiously waiting for the next book. But it was great to see Stephanie Garber write something that is not Once Upon a Broken Heart. But you should definitely read it. It was great. And then I read another Kindle book called The Kiss Curse. That's part of the same universe as The X-Hex, which is another witchy romance book that I read the previous October. And again, I was just kind of feeling that slump looming over me. And whenever I'm in that place, I just need to read like really quick romance books, try to read as fast as possible to get ahead of it. So that's why I picked up that book. And I don't think it's worth your time. It was not as good as The X-Hex. I think the writing was still surprisingly solid for that type of book. Sometimes I just expect the writing to be bad and cringy. This was better, but I think the plot was really, really lacking. It felt like we didn't even have a plot until the last 3/4 of the book in a pretty negative way. And I think I rated that maybe 3 stars. The setting is very Halloween-y, very fun and spooky season in a way that I enjoy, but there was just no substance to it. And so I don't personally think it's worth anybody's time. But The X-Hex, the other book, was great, and I would recommend that one for spooky season. And then I read another Kindle book called The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. That was on Kindle Unlimited. Another one that I had been looking for the physical copy for a long time though, and I couldn't find it in any bookstores. So I ended up just reading it on Kindle. This is kind of a dark academia mystery book. It's the same author that wrote The Silent Patient. And overall, I really, really loved it. It was very much trending to be a 5-star for me, except that the ending was so out of the blue, whereas I think his other books that I've read, he leaves little clues for you to try and attempt to figure it out. And then there's a twist and it's crazy and you're like, wow, that's amazing. amazing. But then even if you weren't expecting it at all, you can go back throughout the book and look for the clues that were left and be like, oh, that's why that was there. That's why that was there. That didn't happen in the Maidens at all. There's no way on God's green earth that anybody could ever predict what was going to happen at the end of the Maidens. And it actually worked against it for me personally, because I wanted to see the cleverness. I wanted to see all of the plots lining up and everything tying together. And it didn't get that. And so it kind of knocked it down for me, where it was going to be a 5-star, but then it ended up being a 4-star. That being said, still really, really loved it. Loved the setting. It's perfect to read around October and November for spooky season. The Dark Academia vibes were immaculate, and I would highly recommend it. It's just that the ending disappointed me. And then I reread the first book in an Ember in the Ashes series. My goal is to finish this series in 2026. I have not read any of the other books, but I did read the first book when it came out, initially when it was first published, and then I never read any of the other books. And now with these new book covers, I saw them sometime last year and was like, wow, those are so sexy looking. I want those books and I want to read those books now. And that is the magic of reprint, baby. It works. So An Ember in the Ashes, I loved it. I think I rated it a 4-star. It's the perfect first book in a series. I'm engaged. I'm excited to read the other ones. And I don't know if the other ones are going to be worth it to read because I haven't read them yet, but it's looking good. So if you want to read An Ember in the Ashes, the series with me this year, pick it up and we'll read it together. Oh, I missed a book somewhere between Alchemy of Secrets and The Kiss Curse. My bad. I also read Tress of the Emerald Sea, which is my first Brandon Sanderson book. And I know that doesn't say a lot because apparently this Brandon Sanderson book is the most unique and different Brandon Sanderson book to anything else that he's written. So it's not necessarily like I've read a Mistborn kind of thing. Oh, hello. But I did really like this one. It felt very similar to A Princess Bride, kind of whimsical, funny fantasy vibes. The magic system in this is incredibly unique and I really, really loved it. And it almost was even like a cozy fantasy type vibe, but just with higher stakes. And that was really awesome. So I would highly recommend that you read this. And some people told me that I shouldn't read this as my first Brandon Sanderson book because it is so different to his other books. Who cares? I mean, if you want to read this as your first one, just go for it. It doesn't have to feel like his other works. It doesn't have to make you want to read Mistborn next, even though I do want to read Mistborn at some point. It doesn't matter. Just read it if you want to. Read Mistborn first if you want to read that first. I'm sure it's amazing. This was wonderful and I enjoyed it. I think I rated it a 4-star and it's definitely worth your time. And then I read The Book of Lost Hours. This was similar to The Book of Doors that I picked up in 2024, where I was walking through Barnes & Noble and I saw the cover and I was like, that looks awesome. Read the synopsis and was like, that looks awesome. Saw that it was a debut novel and was like, that's awesome. And so then I took it home and I read it and it was great. It was awesome. This is kind of like a historical fiction fantasy that has time travel involved in it as well. We're jumping through a lot of different timelines. It's really, really fun, beautifully written, such a fun world. It reminds me of something like The Age of Adeline or The Midnight Library or The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. If you liked any of those type of vibes, I think you would really enjoy this book. The one thing that I'll say about it is I read this as part of a 24-hour reading challenge, and because of that, I read it really, really, really quickly, which means that I was able to stay engaged with the book. And I think that if I had taken my time with this book and maybe read it over the course of like a week, I would have lost more interest. It is slower in my opinion, but because I read it really quickly, I was very connected to it. So just keep that in mind. But I would recommend that you add this to your 2026 TBR. All right, and now we're into the month of November, and I had really big plans for November. I was gonna read a whole heck of a lot in November, and then bad things happened, and I only read one book in November, but it was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that this has been a monster on my shelf for years. I have had this book for so long, more than half a decade. I think I got it in 2019, and I wanted to put it in the red pile so badly for so long, and I finally did it. I read this in November. It took me a long time because honestly, it took me a long time to get into. I didn't love or feel very connected to the characters, but I thought the magic system was interesting, and I loved the Dark Academia vibes. It was a good time. I don't think I'll read the rest of the series. I think I rated this at 3.5 or 3.75. It was a little dark for my taste, just consistently dark, but it was fun, and I'm so glad that I read it. and that's that. And then I didn't read for a really long time, like over a month, which is the longest that I haven't read in literally years. And then towards the end of December, I think maybe right before Christmas, like the week before Christmas, I was like, I need to read all of the short, Christmassy, stupid, cringy, cheesy romance books that I possibly can and see what happens. Which brings us to the end of December, where I read like 8 books in the span of about a week or two, maybe like 10 days. The first one that I read was Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. I had been anticipating this just because I'm a fan of B.K. Borison, and especially after First Time Caller, I couldn't wait to see what she was going to do with this Christmas book, and it didn't disappoint. It was great. Once again, the dialogue is incredible. It had all of the Christmassy holiday vibes that I was looking for, and I had a great time with it, and I rated it 4 stars, and personally, I would highly recommend it, but don't read it anytime besides around Christmas, and that applies to most of these books. And then I read The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year, which has been on my shelf since last year. It was a book of the month pick in 2024, and I didn't end up getting to it last December, and again, I'm not going to read it any other time besides Christmas. And so I read this one and was really surprised by how much I liked it, actually. It feels very Agatha Christie-esque in a weird way. Like, it honestly is more of a mystery than a romance book. Again, it follows a writer, and again, it makes me sad for all the writers that have to deal with the publishing industry. That's a separate thing. Overall, though, I really surprisingly enjoyed it. It was short, it was fun, the vibes were great, and Merry Christmas. And this is not a Christmas book, but I did decide to read Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This has been on my shelf for a while, and I really want to read the rest of the 3 books in this series as well. This kind of takes place around a time-traveling coffee cafe-ish thing, but not really time-traveling in the true sense, more of like time-traveling observing, if that makes sense, where people can sit in a specific chair and they can go back in time to sometime different when they were in the coffee shop, but nothing that they do actually changes the future, so you're more just kind of observing an event that happened or took place. It was really sweet. It's kind of like 4 short stories within one story, or 4 chapters-ish, where it follows 4 different people as they go to this cafe and learn about the time traveling and focus on their problems and their dilemmas. And it was honestly really beautiful. I enjoyed it a lot. It was a little slow in the beginning. It took me a second to get into, maybe because the last 2 books that I had read were just so like boom, 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 fast-paced, romance, cheesy Christmas fun time. But I am really glad that I ended up reading this book, and I rated it a 4 star, and I definitely think it's worth your time. And then I read Merry Christmas, You Filthy Animal. This was in an effort to find more cute, cheesy Christmas books that didn't suck. I went to Barnes & Noble and I found this one, and this book is so long. It's like 450 pages. I made it to page 350-ish and was like, I can't read this anymore. I literally can't read it anymore. And so I very briefly skimmed the last 100 pages, but I guess you could consider this a DNF, although I am counting it as a book that I read because I read most of it, probably up to like that point, which I really shouldn't have. I should have DNF'd it earlier because this book sucked. This is some of the cringiest dialogue I have ever read in any book ever, and I was really disappointed by it because I could have read a different cute cheesy Christmas book, and I wasted time on this one, and that's what this book is, a waste of time. Don't read it. I think this is my least favorite book of the entire year. I'm rating it 1 star, also /DNF because I didn't finish it, but I am rating it 1 star because I think I got the gist, and this is my least favorite book, so The next book that I read was Flight by Lynn Stagerstrong. This is not a romance book, but it is a book that takes place around Christmas. It focuses on these 3 siblings and their spouses as they're celebrating their first Christmas after their mother died, and they all kind of come together in one place and spend the next 3-4 days together. And they're not really close, and they're all still kind of grieving their mom, and it kind of is just about their relationships and the drama and the grief that they're all going through. And I really liked that, and I really liked the setting, and I was interested in all of these characters. I think my problem was that nothing really got resolved at the end of the book. They all still like didn't really like each other. They just kind of gained maybe like a mutual respect for each other, and I think I just wanted more. I wanted more, and it didn't give me enough. And I didn't really like any of these characters, and there were no redemptive parts about them in the end, which is what I was expecting and what I was hoping for. So I kind of started the book and ended the book in the exact same place, and to me that's not worth reading personally. I do think it was written really well, and I do like the setup and the plot of it. I just wish that there was a better ending, and so I ended up rating this a 3-star, and I probably would say that it's not worth your time though. Back to cheesy Christmas fun time. Along Came Holly was the next book that I read. I think I liked this a lot more in the beginning, but it just kind of went downhill. We started out strong and I was like, oh, perfect. This is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I want to read the day before Christmas. I literally think I finished this on Christmas Eve, and it just kind of kept getting worse, and nothing was really happening in the plot, but also nothing was really happening with the romance either. I think it just got a little bit boring, and there wasn't enough romantic development between the characters. Not romantic development, but just character development in general between the characters to keep me interested. I did finish it, but maybe I shouldn't have finished it. I don't know. I'm really bad at DNFing books, and maybe I should get better at that in 2026. But that was Along Came Holly. I don't think it's worth your time. I rated it a 2.5. And then after Christmas, I read Twice by Mitch Albom. So Mitch Albom, I've only read one other book of his, and that was The Five People That You Meet in The Five People You Meet in Heaven. I read that maybe 10 years ago, maybe more than 10 years ago, and I remember really liking it. And then it was just like this author flew away out of my brain. And every once in a while, I'd see one of his books and be like, that looks familiar. I think I read one of his books. I think I liked it, but I never picked up anything else, never knew anything else about him. And then I was in Barnes & Noble the other day, and I saw this book as a very, very newly published book, and I recognized Mitch Albom, and I read the synopsis of this, and I was like, yeah, I think I really want to read this. And I actually started this book the day that I finished the previous book, Along Came Holly, I think, and I wasn't intending to read more, because I had just done like a huge reading sprint with Along Came Holly. I read like 250 pages that day, and I was like, man, that's enough. I don't need to read more, but maybe I'll just start this one and just get 30 pages in and see what we're dealing with. I read almost the whole book. I sat down and I couldn't stop reading. I was so invested and so engaged. And also it's really easy to read this book, so it was really easy to go into it quickly. This reminds me of the movie About Time, which I love. It follows our main character who has the ability to relive moments twice. It's not even really time travel. I guess it is technically time travel, but he can go back to a specific moment, do it again, get a do-over, and change things. But you can only do it one other time, so you have to live with your decision and the consequences of those decisions, whatever may happen. And so it kind of follows our main character from when he's like 8 years old to 80 years old, and how he uses this gift that he has and his one great love that he has in his lifetime, and how he kind of uses the gift to get her to fall in love with him or to maintain his relationship. It really is so beautifully written. It's funny, it's sweet, it's heartfelt, and it packs an emotional punch at the end for sure. And I wasn't expecting it. I picked it up totally on a whim, but this ended up being a 5 stars for me. And I ended this book and I was like, I think I need to go back and read every other book that he's written. Kind of in the same way that I feel about Frederick Backman. I'm just like, yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy I want to be reading. So highly recommend you read this book for sure. And the very last book that I read of 2025 ended up being the perfect book to end the year on. It was The Strength of the Few, which is the second book after The Will of the Many in the Hierarchy series. I don't know how many books there's going to be. I hope it's only 3 because I just want to get to the end now. I'm not really going to say anything about the plot of this one. 1, because we are so over time, but 2, I don't want to give anything away. I think The Will of the Many really, really got hyped up for all of the right reasons. People generally love it. I don't think I've seen a single negative thing about The Will of the Many, and rightly so. It was my absolute favorite book of 2024 for so many reasons, and I have been anticipating this second book for so long, and it came out right at the beginning of November. I was planning on reading it basically right then, and then everything kind of went wrong and I stopped reading for a while. And then when I did pick up reading in December, I was like, I just need to read cheesy romance. And then it was literally like a couple days before New Year's, and I was like, maybe I could just try. Maybe I could just try to read this 700-page book in the next couple of days. I'm not doing anything. Let's just see what happens. And I did it, and I read basically the entire book in 3 days, and it's amazing. Absolutely incredible. It's everything that I wanted it to be, and I just love this series so much. And so if you're currently reading The Will of the Many, you have a lot to look forward to. If you have already read The Strength of the Few, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And if you haven't read either of these books, what are you doing? Please go read them. Anyway, that is the 60 books that I read in 2025. There are so many in there. Honestly, the thing that surprised me the most is that I actually didn't rate a lot of 5-star books. Technically, I had 9 books that I rated 5 stars, but 4 of them were from the Throne of Glass series, so they were rereads. So I'm not even really counting them. So I only had 5 new books that I rated 5 stars out of 60 in all of 2025, which is not very normal for me. I feel like I'm pretty generous with a 5-star, but overall I still feel like I had a really good reading year. I found some of my most favorite books ever. I got some great sequels, started series, finished series. It was a wonderful year, and I really appreciate you guys sticking with me throughout everything, the ups and the downs, the times of silence, and the overposting. There's a lot of fun stuff. So I would love to hear what your favorite book of 2025 was. What are you most excited to read in 2026? And what was your favorite Christmas present? As always, thank you so much for all of your kindness and graciousness towards me and your patience as I have been completely absent the last couple of months. I'm excited to be back. But thank you for liking and commenting and joining me on this little corner of the internet. And we'll see you really, really soon.